They came with badges and suspicion. No warrant, no proof. But they weren't ready for who was waiting inside that house. If there's one thing Danielle Watkins had learned living in rural Lynn County, Oregon, it's that peace was something you had to fight for. Not loud, not dramatic. Quiet fights, paperwork, phone calls, shrugging off the stairs at the feed store, calculating groceries while juggling bills. It was the kind of fight that didn't make the news, but it wore you down just the same. It was a Thursday when it happened. A normal Thursday. Or at least it started that way. Danielle was out in the field behind the old barn, kneeling in the damp grass, trying to fix a busted section of the irrigation line. Her hands were muddy, her phone sat face down in the dirt beside her, and her youngest, Kendall, a wiry 9-year-old with an imagination that never slowed down, was chasing chickens barefoot. Her teenage son, Reese, was inside the house, probably dodging his online classes again, but Danielle hadn't had the energy to argue that morning. Then she heard tires crunching the gravel. She stood up, brushing dirt off her jeans, squinting as 2 Sheriff's Department SUVs pulled up to the front gate. Big, boxy, government-issued things. The kind that looked more at home in a car chase than outside her farmhouse. Her heart knocked a little harder than usual. She wasn't expecting anyone. She dropped the wrench and walked around the house to meet them. 2 deputies stepped out. One was a tall white man with mirrored sunglasses he didn't take off. The other, shorter, broader, looked younger. Latino maybe, with a tight jaw and fingers that never stopped fidgeting at his belt. They both wore bulletproof vests over their uniforms. Danielle kept her voice calm. "Can I help you, officers?" The tall one didn't smile. "We got a call about possible stolen property on the premises. Mind if we take a look around?" She blinked. "Stolen property? From where?" "Can't say. Tip came in anonymous." "And do you have a warrant?" The younger one cleared his throat. "Just need to have a look, ma'am. Shouldn't take long." She crossed her arms, planting her feet. "Without a warrant, you're not stepping onto my land." There was a pause. The tall deputy glanced back at the SUV, then at the house, then back at Danielle. Something about his posture changed. Not aggressive, just entitled, like he didn't expect her to push back. "We can always get one," he said flatly. Danielle didn't flinch. "Then go get one." They didn't leave. Instead, they stood there, radioed in, made calls, whispered between each other while she stood in her driveway, feeling the familiar squeeze in her chest. Not quite panic, but close. Reese opened the front door halfway, peeking out. "Mom, what's going on?" "Stay inside," she said quickly. "Close the door." But the officers noticed. The younger one stepped forward. "How many people inside the house, ma'am?" Danielle narrowed her eyes. "Just my son." "Why?" "Just making sure everyone's safe." "Safe from what?" she asked. "Y'all got a reason to think someone here's dangerous?" The silence that followed felt loud. Then the tall deputy clicked his radio again and muttered something Danielle couldn't catch. A third SUV pulled up 10 minutes later, then a fourth. They were setting up like this was something serious, like her little patch of soil and overgrown grass might explode if they didn't contain it. That's when Danielle knew something was off. Not just the call, not just the vague tip, but the way they looked at her house like it was a threat. The way they looked at her. She wiped her hands on her jeans, holding back every urge to yell, to curse, to demand answers, because she knew what would happen if she lost her cool. She'd read the stories, watched them online. Black women didn't get the benefit of the doubt in these situations, but she also wasn't about to roll over. "You're not searching anything without paperwork," she repeated. The deputies didn't respond. They just started circling the perimeter, eyeing her barn, her shed, her tools, taking pictures with their phones, watching her like she was the one who might bolt at any second. But then, one of them headed toward the house, and that's when Danielle stepped in front of him. Danielle planted herself between the officer and the front steps. He was younger, maybe early 30s, and didn't make eye contact as he tried to step around her. She didn't budge. "I said no," she told him. "Unless you have a warrant, you are not entering my house." The officer paused, hand resting near his belt. "Ma'am, if you cooperate, this goes a lot smoother." She laughed once, bitter and sharp. "Cooperate? I'm not the one who showed up 4 deep over a rumor with 0 paperwork." Reese opened the door again, more cautious this time. His phone was in his hand, recording. Danielle saw it and gave the smallest nod. She didn't tell him to stop, not this time. The taller deputy walked over, his boots heavy on the gravel. Is there a problem here? No, Danielle said. Not yet. But there will be if you keep pushing my door like that. He tilted his head. You're being difficult. She took a breath. I'm being a citizen, one who knows her rights. That didn't go over well. He stepped a little closer than necessary. Are you hiding something? Danielle clenched her jaw. I'm hiding my patience. They stared each other down. Behind her, Reese raised his voice just enough. I'm live on Instagram. Whole school's watching. The younger officer looked uncomfortable now. His eyes flicked between Danielle and Reese's camera. The tension had started to cut through even him, but the tall one wasn't backing off. We're not here to harass you, ma'am. Just looking to clear up a report. Danielle didn't answer. She just pointed toward the shed out back. That's the only thing you'll be looking at, and you'll do it from outside the fence. The men stood there another beat. Then the tall one muttered something under his breath and waved toward the others. They spread out, circling the barn and the shed, snapping photos, talking into radios. One of them leaned close to her tractor, as if expecting to find something tucked inside the rusted engine block. Reese came out slowly, keeping the camera pointed forward. He walked up next to his mother. Is this even legal? He whispered. Danielle didn't answer right away. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she kept them low, at her sides. They're trying to provoke, she said softly. Don't give it to them. They think we're stupid, Reese said. They think we're alone. Out by the fence line, Kendall had finally realized something wasn't right. He came jogging over, feet still muddy, holding a broken toy truck in one hand. Mom, who are they? She turned around fast, dropping to one knee. Baby, go back inside. But now. He hesitated, then turned and walked quickly toward the porch. Reese reached over and guided him the rest of the way in. She stood back up, and then the shouting started. It came from one of the officers near the shed. Got something over here. Danielle spun around. What? The younger deputy jogged over to the side of the barn, waving the others. They gathered around an old blue tarp, torn, half buried under some busted equipment. One of them pulled it back and pointed. It was a pile of scrap metal, wire, a rusted-out engine block from a junked-out ATV that hadn't run in years. This look familiar? The officer called out. Danielle walked over, confusion tightening across her face. Yeah, that's mine. Where'd you get it? It came with the land. He nodded like he didn't believe her. Funny, had a call about stolen utility panels. This stuff looks like it came from a construction site. Her voice was flat. That's not what it is. The deputy pulled out his phone and started snapping more photos. Danielle felt something rising inside her. Not rage, exactly. Something colder, like humiliation mixed with helplessness, like they could make anything mean anything if they said it enough. They're trying to make something stick, she said under her breath. She looked up and saw the neighbors. Mrs. Kinsey, from across the road, was standing on her porch, arms folded. Two teenagers she didn't recognize had their phones out, recording. There was a man in a pickup truck parked at the edge of the long dirt road, pretending not to watch, but definitely not leaving either. Her life was being turned inside out, and half the county was getting a front row seat. One of the officers started walking toward the front porch again. Danielle lost it. No, I told you, you are not going in my house. He ignored her, kept moving. Hey, she barked, louder now. This is harassment. You don't get to just... And then, through the low rattle of radios and tense silence, she heard a voice, calm, deep, quiet. I think y'all need to explain what exactly you're doing here. The officers turned. Danielle turned too, and froze. Her brother, Colby Watkins, stood at the edge of the gravel drive. Dust on his boots, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder. He wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. The way he stood, the way he looked directly at each badge without blinking, it made the air feel different. Colby hadn't said he was coming, but he was here now, and he saw everything. But the cops didn't know who he was. Not yet. And that made all the difference. Colby didn't move. He stood there, steady, eyes locked on the officers like he was measuring every breath they took. Danielle felt her throat tighten. It had been over a year since she'd seen her brother in person. Afghanistan had been the last stop. Then Germany. Then silence for months. Now he was standing there, like God had dropped him into the chaos at just the right moment. The taller officer stepped forward, clearly trying to figure out who this man was. "Sir, this is an active investigation. We're responding to a call." Colby didn't blink. "That's so? Because from where I'm standing, this looks more like harassment." "Do you live here?" "Nope," Colby said. "But she does. That's my sister. And I've got questions." The deputy didn't answer. Colby stepped forward, slowly, deliberately, and dropped his duffel bag on the porch. "You got a warrant?" he asked. No one said anything. "Then you're trespassing." The younger deputy shifted uncomfortably. "We were given a tip about stolen construction materials. We're just trying to do our jobs." Colby nodded slightly. "Show me the paperwork." "We're waiting for a judge." "Then you wait in your car." Danielle had never been more still in her life. She could feel the power shift, not from volume or threats, but from posture, presence. Colby didn't need to explain who he was. It was obvious, but the officers didn't like it. The tall one stepped closer. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back and let us handle this." Colby smiled once, slow and controlled. "You know what happens when people like me come home and find cops pressing their sister without cause? We don't step back. We step in." That's when the youngest officer finally cracked. "Wait, Colby Watkins? Like, Staff Sergeant Watkins?" Colby looked at him and nodded once. The deputy's mouth opened, then shut. His eyes dropped for just a second. The tall officer turned to him. "You know him?" "Yeah," the young deputy muttered. He's kind of a legend." Danielle exhaled, but quietly. Some of the neighbors had moved closer now, still pretending not to watch. One guy, she thought his name was Trent, was recording from behind a row of mailboxes, trying to keep out of sight. Another lady from down the road had driven by twice in the last 10 minutes, real slow. It was a show now. Her life turned into a spectacle, all because someone with no name, no face, no evidence decided she looked suspicious. She turned to Colby. "You couldn't have picked a better time." He kept his eyes forward. "Didn't like the way you sounded on the phone last month. Thought I'd check on you in person." One of the officers finally stepped back toward his vehicle. The others followed, talking into radios again. There was less confidence in their movements now, more hesitation. But Colby wasn't done. "Y'all think a black woman trying to grow tomatoes and raise her kids is worth 4 patrol units and a drone in the sky?" Danielle glanced up. Sure enough, the faint buzz of a small drone could be heard circling high above the field. Probably county surveillance. She hadn't even noticed it. The taller officer finally spoke up again. "We'll be on our way." Colby tilted his head. "Oh no, you're going to file a report, and I want the case number before you go." The officer hesitated, then muttered something into his radio. A few minutes later, a printed slip was handed over, thin, like it meant nothing. Colby folded it in half without reading it. Then, and only then, did he nod toward the cars. "You can leave now." The gravel crunched again. Engines started. One by one, the cruisers turned and rolled away, slow and quiet. No sirens, no apology. Danielle stood there, arms crossed, watching until the last one disappeared down the road. She didn't say anything. Colby didn't either. But inside the house, Reese let out a sound that was halfway between a laugh and a sob. And for the first time all day, Danielle realized just how scared her kids had been. Inside the house, it was quiet. Too quiet. Kendall had gone upstairs without a word, probably hiding under his blankets like he did during thunderstorms. Reese stood near the kitchen table, phone still in hand, screen black now. He wasn't recording anymore. He just kept staring at the front door, like it might open again. Danielle closed it behind her, slowly, and turned the deadbolt. Colby dropped his bag by the wall, then turned to face her. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded too quickly. "Yeah, I'm good." He raised an eyebrow. "No, you're not." She let out a shaky breath and leaned against the counter. "It's always like this out here. Little things, all the time. People calling code enforcement because the grass is too high. Random inspections from the county. A flat tire gets reported as an abandoned vehicle. But this? 4 cruisers? They were going to walk in my house with my kids here." Colby looked around the small kitchen. Same old faded wallpaper, same hand-built shelves their dad had made 20 years ago. But the air was heavier now. "You're on their radar," he said quietly. "I didn't do anything." "You don't have to." Danielle covered her face with her hands. Her voice broke. I'm trying, Colby. I swear I'm trying. I'm doing the books myself, filing every form. I even called that grants office in Salem about the soil rehab program. But no one helps unless there's a camera on. And out here, I'm just the black lady on the old Watkins land. Colby didn't say anything for a moment. Then he pulled out a chair and sat down, like they were just back in their mom's kitchen arguing about curfew again. You remember that year I came home from basic and the truck wouldn't start? He said. She looked at him, frowning. I was in uniform, in the driveway, and some guy from town, some neighbor, I guess, came up and asked if I was there to clean the gutters. Said he heard the family moved out. Danielle rubbed her temples. Of course I remember. I was ready to break that guy's nose. But you didn't. No, you told me not to. Because if you did, the story would have changed. From a dumb insult to a violent incident. That's how it works. Reese finally spoke. That's still how it works. Colby turned to him. You okay? Reese nodded slowly. Yeah, I didn't know what to do. I wanted to yell at them, but I figured the phone was safer. Colby gave him a look of respect. It was. Reese stared at the table. I kept thinking, what if they did go inside? What if they thought I was reaching for something? I had a spoon in my hand when I opened the door. Danielle's breath caught in her chest. Colby leaned back. That's why I came. I didn't trust it. Something felt off. You didn't call, she said, voice softer now. Didn't want to give you time to say not to come. That got a tired smile out of her. I got 30 days before I check in again, he said. Might as well spend them fixing whatever they broke around here. Danielle's eyes welled up again. They didn't break anything. He gave her a look. She looked away. Okay, maybe they cracked something. He stood and walked toward the sink, glancing out the window. The neighbors had all gone back inside. The show was over. For now. I know you don't want to raise hell, he said, but you're not invisible. They're testing how much they can get away with. Danielle leaned her head back against the fridge. What am I supposed to do, Colby? Sue the sheriff's department? Call the news? That makes things worse. Sometimes, he said. But sometimes silence makes them worse too. He looked around again. You kept Dad's tools? She nodded. In the barn, what's left of it. He smiled faintly. Might take a look tomorrow. Feels good to fix something. There was a long pause, then Reese asked, Uncle Colby, were you scared when you saw them here? Colby thought about it. No, I was angry. But you didn't yell. I didn't need to. Real strength doesn't come from volume. It comes from knowing who you are and making sure they know it too. Danielle looked at him. I don't think I've got that kind of strength left. He walked over, put a hand on her shoulder. You do. You just forgot. That's why I'm here. But outside, someone was still watching, and Colby saw it. A black pickup creeping by for the third time. Colby moved toward the front window, his eyes following the truck as it slowed down again. Same one, same tinted windows, no plates visible. It crept past the house like a wolf circling a fence. You know that truck? He asked. Danielle came up behind him and looked. No, it's been doing that since last week. You tell anybody? She shook her head. I figured it was just someone from the co-op, or a neighbor. I didn't want to cause trouble. Colby turned from the window. People who don't mean trouble don't circle a house like that. He went to his duffel bag, unzipped it, and pulled out a small black notebook, worn at the edges. Then something smaller, a rectangular black case. Danielle crossed her arms. Please tell me you're not pulling a gun out. It's legal, locked, registered. I'm not walking around with it, but I won't sit in this house and pretend they don't know what they're doing. Reese sat on the edge of the couch, eyes wide. Do you think they're coming back? Colby snapped the case shut again. Not tonight. They like daylight. They like an audience. Danielle rubbed her temples. This can't be my life. I'm growing lettuce and raising kids. That's it. No one would do this to the Wilsons down the road. They did it, Colby said, because they thought you didn't have backup. There was a sudden knock at the door, 3 loud bangs. Everyone froze. Colby raised one hand toward Reese. Stay seated. Don't open anything. Danielle walked to the door and looked through the peephole. It was the younger officer from earlier, the one who had recognized Colby's name. Alone. She cracked the door open, chain still on. "What?" she asked flatly. He shifted awkwardly on the porch, hat in hand. I came back alone. Not official. Off the record." Danielle raised her eyebrows. "That sounds like a bad idea." I wanted to say I'm sorry about earlier." She didn't speak. "I've been on the force for 2 years," he continued. "They treat rural tips like gospel out here. It's easier than doing real legwork. And he paused, looking down. "They told us this place was high risk. Said to expect someone armed." Danielle's eyes narrowed. "You mean someone black?" He looked like he wanted to deny it, but he didn't. Colby stood behind her now, arms crossed. "So what now? You hand her an apology and everything's fine?" The officer took a slow breath. "No, I just wanted to be a human about it." Danielle finally unlatched the door. "If you want to help, then put something in writing. Let me know who made that call." He shook his head. "Can't. Anonymous tip lines protect the caller." "Of course they do," Colby muttered. The officer looked at him. "You really are him, huh?" Colby didn't answer. "I read about what you did outside Ramadi," he said. "Whole convoy was ambushed. You pulled 2 guys out under fire, took one in the leg." Colby gave a dry laugh. "And now I'm here, defending a tomato garden." The officer looked like he didn't know what to say to that. Danielle spoke up. "Listen, you seem decent, but next time, don't show up with guns unless you've got proof. And not just because it's me, because there are kids here." He nodded. "I get that." "Do you?" He swallowed. "I'm trying to." She closed the door without another word. Back inside, she leaned against it and let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Colby walked past her and into the kitchen, grabbing a glass from the cabinet. Reese looked between them. "Are they going to come back?" "Maybe," Colby said. Danielle joined him at the counter. "What then?" He filled the glass. "Then we film, we file, we call press if we need to. You've got a right to be here, to grow what you want, to raise your boys without someone treating you like a threat." She looked at him. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not, but it's not complicated either." Later that night, Colby sat outside on the porch with the dogs at his feet and a bat resting across his lap, just in case. Danielle sat beside him. The moon hung low over the fields. She glanced over. "You think Dad would have known what to do?" Colby shook his head. "No, but he would have stood in the way if they tried anything, just like you did." Danielle smiled faintly. "Yeah, I guess I did." But as the wind picked up across the field, Danielle realized something deep in her chest. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone out here, and that made all the difference. By morning, the truck hadn't come back. The chickens were loud again, Kendall was up early like always, and Reese stood at the kitchen sink sipping cereal milk straight from the bowl. The house felt normal, almost. But Danielle moved slower now. She didn't flinch at the door, but she glanced through the blinds twice before stepping out with her coffee. Colby was already in the barn. She could hear him hammering something, probably fixing the sagging door she kept putting off. It was comforting, that sound, steady, familiar. Later, she joined him, arms folded, watching as he adjusted the hinges. "Thanks for yesterday," she said, "and for not lecturing me." He glanced at her. "Why would I lecture you?" "I don't know. For staying quiet too long, for thinking I could handle it all on my own." "You have been handling it," he said. "That's the problem. You shouldn't have to." She smiled, small and tired. "I used to think being strong meant doing everything by myself," she said, "holding it in, letting it pass." "Strength isn't silence," Colby said. "It's knowing when to stand up and when to let someone stand with you." She let that sit for a second. "There's going to be another day like that," she said finally. "Sooner or later." "Probably," he agreed. "But now you've got video, neighbors who saw it, a name on record, and someone who's not going anywhere." Danielle walked over and leaned against the wall, looking out across the field. The soil still needed tilling. The fencing needed work. Bills were due next week, but it didn't feel so impossible anymore. "I used to think being out here would make me invisible," she said. "Turns out, it just makes the spotlight harder to escape." Colby nodded. "Then we make it shine the other way." She looked at him. "Make sure when they watch, he continued. They see someone who won't break, who knows the law, who has backup. That's the kind of story that makes them think twice next time. Danielle stepped outside and stood in the dirt. Kendall ran past, chasing a stray dog, barefoot again. Reese followed him, laughing, filming on his phone. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. She took a breath, deeper than yesterday. Sometimes the loudest power comes from quiet resistance, from saying, I'm still here, no matter how many times the system tries to erase you. If you're watching this, maybe you've felt that kind of pressure. Maybe you've watched someone you love get treated like a threat when all they were trying to do was live. Stand with them, speak up, be someone's backup. Because no one should have to fight alone, especially not at home. Call your local representatives, film everything, know your rights. And if you've got someone like Colby in your life, don't wait for things to break, invite them in.